Run a scientific experiment on yourself. Find the center that brings you pleasure regardless of audience or applause, regardless of how culture tallies your effort on its scoreboard. That's the call I keep hearing, the quiet instruction beneath the noise, and every time I ignore it, I feel myself split into pieces, my energy frayed by 1,000 eyes that aren't really watching. Have you ever felt that lonely pressure to perform for ghosts, to shape your soul like a brand? I want to offer something simpler and braver. Step into your own labyrinth and find the thread that doesn't snap when no one else is holding it. My myth is Theseus. Not because I want to make a hero of ambition, but because the labyrinth is the perfect map of the modern mind. Corridors of incentives, dead ends of approval, siren rooms of likes and commentary, a mythic architecture built to make you forget your way back. The call to adventure arrived for me as a sentence that wouldn't let go. Find your center, and everything will begin to align. Not because the world will finally clap, but because you'll finally stop outsourcing the task of meaning to a crowd that never really knows what it wants, especially from you. Jung would say this call comes from the self, that central organizing archetype pulling the scattered fragments of our psyche toward wholeness. In that voice, there is both an invitation and a warning. To ignore it is to remain a tourist in your own life. But I hesitated. The refusal came dressed in the robes of reason. What if my center is just foolishness? What if I pour myself into something that never pays out, never wins the cultural lottery? We are trained to seek tribunals, to let anonymous judges stamp our work with yes or no. And the primitive terror beneath that is this: if no one understands me, am I real? Bernardo Kastrup, the philosopher of analytic idealism, suggests that what we call the world is a mental process, experience within a broader field of mind. If that's true, then the tribunal is not an objective God sky. It's another hallway in the labyrinth, a projection in the theater. The only court with jurisdiction over your meaning is the one seated at the still point of your own experience. That insight didn't kill my fear, but it did put it under new light. I was mistaking a shadow for the sun. The crossing of the threshold began with an experiment I set up the way a scientist would. Define the question, control the variables, observe the result. My question was simple. What activity, pursued in private, feels like oxygen even when no one knows I'm breathing it? I set aside windows of time and stripped them of external feedback. No notifications, no publishing, no telling anyone. I wanted the raw signal. Have you ever done that? Made something and forbidden yourself from showing it? It is a strange detox. The hands shake at first because they're used to applause like a drug. The first trials in the labyrinth were subtle. Old corridors lured me back. The shortcut to recognition, the bait of speed, the intoxicating idea that if I make it for them, I will be safe from myself. But the myth keeps reminding me. Theseus enters with a thread. Jung would call that thread the symbol that connects the waking ego to the deeper self, an intuition, a little line of gold you can feel in your fingertips. For me, the thread was the felt sense, bodily, quiet, of doing the thing that fills me from the inside. Marcus Aurelius writes of the inner citadel, the place in us that is free from the weather of reputation. He reminds us to do what is in accord with our nature and let the rest be wind. That stoic fortress became my Ariadne's thread, simple and resilient. Does this feel like the kind of work I would still do if the world went silent tomorrow? The trials grew sharper. In one corridor, I met the looping thought, meaningful equals marketable. In another, the whisper, you only matter if they applaud. These are not arguments, they are spells. And the Minotaur, that mixed creature of instinct and shame, feeds on them. Jung would say the Minotaur is the shadow, the repressed hunger for approval, the rage of the child who wants to be seen, the animal vitality we're embarrassed to admit animates us. You don't defeat the shadow by pretending to be pure. You face it in its chamber. So I walked until I felt the temperature drop, the smell of iron and breath. In the abysm, I didn't slay a beast with a sword. I sat with it. What did it want? To be loved, to be counted, to never be alone. I felt how much of my output had been a treaty with that fear. Please like me, and I'll betray myself just enough to keep you nodding. That realization broke me open. Kastrup's mirror returned. If the world is a movement in mind, then my self-betrayal is an edit applied to the raw film of experience, a self-censorship inserting jump cuts where there should be a single shot. The Minotaur quieted when I told the truth. No tribunal can finally understand me. No audience can substitute for that quiet, yes, I give to my own center. And that's okay. Have you ever felt the relief of letting an imaginary judge walk out of the room? In that emptiness, I found the center not as a place, but as a pulse, a reliable pleasure, independent of witnesses. I won't dress it up with false drama. It wasn't fireworks. It was a steady warmth, a rightness. I recognized it instantly because I had felt versions of it since childhood, before I learned to seek permission. That was the treasure of the labyrinth. Not a crown, but a tuning fork. You strike it, and your whole life begins to arrange itself around the note. Campbell calls this the boon, what the hero brings back. For me, the boon is a method. Keep the experiment running. Periodically strip the activity of external signal and ask whether the thing itself is still singing. If it is, that's the thread. If it isn't, you're in a corridor painted to look like the center. The return journey changed my posture. I still walk the same streets, but with the thread looped around my wrist. The world offers praise and blame as before. I nod to both like passing weather systems. Marcus Aurelius whispers, choose what is yours to choose. Jung nods. Hold the tension of opposites, ambition and sincerity, recognition and obscurity, without collapsing into either. Individuation isn't becoming special, it's becoming whole, letting the minotaur live in the sunlight without ruling the house. And Kastrup's framework grounds me when I start fetishizing outcomes. If reality is experiential at root, then quality of consciousness is not a private luxury. It is the primary domain of responsibility. What I cultivate in my center conditions the field I share with you. That turns the experiment into an ethics. The culture's scoreboard becomes a weather report, not a verdict. And paradoxically, when I hold that stance, my work improves because it's cleaner, less distorted by needy edits. The alignment isn't mystical, it's mechanical. Find the center, and decisions begin to sort themselves, like iron filings around a magnet. Projects that don't resonate fall away without drama. Relationships clarify. Time reveals its true price. Even failure becomes information, not identity. Have you ever noticed how a compass makes a map honest? The center is that compass. It doesn't simplify the terrain, but it stops you from arguing with north. As for loneliness, it softens. I used to think being misunderstood meant I was lost. Now I see it as part of the vow. No one will fully understand your exact configuration of meaning, and that's not a tragedy. It's the signature of a living soul. The point isn't to be decoded. The point is to be integrated. And integration doesn't ask the crowd for permission. It asks you to keep your promise to the thread. So this is my invitation, framed as a lab note from the field. Design your own trial. Pick one thing that feels like oxygen and quarantine it from external signal for a time. Notice the tremors of withdrawal, the minotaur's roar, the urge to check the mirrors. Then, when the noise settles, attend to the center, not as an idea but as a sensation of rightness. From there, choose the next step. The experiment is humble, repeatable, falsifiable in your own experience. You don't have to believe me, you just have to run the test. If Theseus could navigate a structure built to confuse, you can navigate a feed built to addict. If he could face a creature built from shame and strength and make peace with its truth, you can face the part of you that wants to be clapped for and teach it to serve, not rule. The return doesn't crown you king, it makes you trustworthy to yourself. And from that trust, life starts to click into place. Not because the labyrinth disappears, but because you finally carry a light that doesn't depend on anyone else's torch. Tell me, what thread have you ignored because no one else could see it? What center have you postponed until after the next approval? The door is open. The experiment is waiting. And if you need a benediction before you begin, take this. There is a value in you that stands beyond material counting on this plane, a depth that is only yours to sound. No tribunal can judge it. Few will understand it. That is more than okay. That is the point. Find your center, and everything will begin to align. I'll meet you there, in the quiet, where the thread hums. Tell me in the comments what experiment you'll run next, and what you found when the audience left the room. Reflection by Felipe Brando.